Hi there.
Hi,
I'm Dr. Nimali Fernando,
and I'm Wendy Cannon.
and we are from the Dr. Young Project in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And we are here today to discuss parenting proactively. This is the fourth series of a session where we're discussing how to raise healthy eaters during this unprecedented pandemic. And we've been going through a number of parenting strategies. And so today's parenting strategy is about parenting proactively. So some of you may have joined us before, and some of you may be joining us for the first time. So we thought we could go through a few just introductory slides, let you know who we are and what the focus is of our session and our talk today. So as I said, we are from Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is about 50 miles south of Washington, D.C. And we have a nonprofit organization that really focuses on breaking down barriers and overcoming barriers to eating well. And we have a number of programs that help families really learn how to do that. And we help communities learn how to do that as well. And one of our flagship programs is our Dr. Young Preschool Food Adventure, which is a curriculum that is taught in many schools around our country, and even a little bit outside of our country too. And we teach kids how to enjoy cooking with their friends in school and with their families at home. And in the process, really develop friendships with healthy food that build a foundation of healthy eating for the rest of their lives, hopefully. We started this program back in 2013. I teamed up with a friend of mine who is a pediatric feeding specialist, and we wrote the curriculum for just a few schools, and we have been able to expand that program nationwide and really learn a lot of lessons in the 6 years that we've been implementing the program that can help families raise healthy eaters even at home. Coach Mel and I also have a book called Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater, where we write about parenting strategies that can help you raise a resilient, compassionate, wonderful child, but also can be used in the kitchen to help raise a great eater too. So one of those strategies we're talking about today, here are the 7 strategies. They're sort of stamped throughout the book as we talk about concepts, almost like a passport stamp through a journey of parenting. And the parenting strategy we're going to talk about today is parenting proactively. So I'm going to read you exactly what that means in regard to overall parenting, but also parenting around food. So parenting proactively. Understanding what comes next in your child's development is the key to proactive parenting. Like any other road trip, it's a good idea to know what's around the corner, and how you react to what you encounter is up to you. By anticipating the next step during mealtime experiences, you can set your child up for success. So this is so important to kind of understand that feeding is a developmental process. And when I'm talking to patients all the time, I kind of remind them of that when you're teaching a child to eat, it's like teaching them to read, or teaching them to speak, or teaching them to walk. And Wendy is a preschool teacher, among other things that she does. So she understands early childhood development very well.
Right.
And how important it is to foster that development.
And that you wouldn't give up.
Right.
You wouldn't just say, oh, my kid can't balance on this bike, he's never going to be able to ride a bike. You keep practicing. You put the training wheels on, you go out and you practice, and you don't give up. And so I think parents sometimes fall into that trap of giving up on healthy foods if their child is not readily going for them right away.
Right. I think it's important to know ahead of time that it is a many step process, and there are things you can do along the way to foster that development, but it does take a fair amount of proactiveness and a lot of patience.
And
too.
planning.
And planning, yeah. So that's a lot of kind of what we're talking about today. It's just being proactive, being a good planner. We talked last week about how sometimes that can be tough because kids can develop issues with feeding along the way, just like they can develop issues with other areas of their development.
Right, of their development. Maybe it's their fine motor or speech or even core strength, and you need OT or you need PT.
Speech therapy.
Yeah.
Exactly. So with kids, understanding how issues develop when it comes to their development is really important so that you can figure out how to help that child. So a lot of kids, maybe some of your kids out there, may have little issues in their development. Maybe they're starting to get hesitant around food. And those can develop into bigger feeding issues. So if you're proactive and you kind of can anticipate that maybe there's a little bit of challenges that are coming up ahead, you can steer the ship away from that by understanding how to get help, really. Because sometimes we as parents don't know how to help the child ourselves, but if we can ask experts for help, then you know, we can really set that child on the right path.
And I think this is why this slide is really important, because Dr. Fernando, as a pediatrician, is really able to help families to see how a feeding disorder could develop in young children and how you can kind of get ahead of it and get around it and make sure it doesn't happen by understanding how it works.
So let's just kind of go back to how does this happen? So first of all, we all have physiology, right? It's how our body works. It's how our organs work. It's how they talk to each other. It's how our muscles work. This is all part of our bodies and our growing bodies. So sometimes we may have disordered physiology, and the examples we use most commonly are if a baby is premature and maybe their motor skills aren't developing, and oral motor skills are a separate group of motor skills. They're kind of fine motor skills. And sometimes with premature babies or babies with other musculoskeletal conditions, those may not develop as on the typical developmental windows.
Kids that might have a tongue tie.
A tongue tie,
instance.
exactly. Kids who may have allergies, food allergies.
Yeah.
They may have acid reflux. So somehow those kids, because of their disordered physiology, may find that eating is uncomfortable. And it may not feel natural for them. And so they learn these behaviors to kind of make themselves feel more comfortable. And sometimes that might be avoiding eating or eating very little or eating in a sort of a disordered way.
Or just very specific things that they know won't cause whatever the discomfort is.
Correct. So that can be unexpected for parents and a little bit distressing for parents. So parents may react to that. And sometimes their reaction may actually make the child more uncomfortable or reinforce their learned behavior. So maybe they force them to eat that food, and then the child gets more distressed. And so we call that reactive parenting. And then what can happen is meal times and the family dynamics around mealtime can become disordered. So everybody becomes stressed at mealtime because the child's not eating the way that we want. We're trying to parent. It's actually making the problem worse. And then we get this disordered, stressful feeding dynamic.
That it ripples through the whole family too, because maybe one child only eats this one thing, and then that limits what the rest of the family is eating as well.
Right. So if you have a child who is experiencing some challenges around feeding, it's important to understand that, because there are ways to undo that distress and unlearn those behaviors, which may involve getting an expert to help you so that you can understand just how to navigate that.
But even more so today, what we're hoping to show you is how to not go down this road where a feeding disorder develops, because by being proactive and understanding what's going on and sort of getting ahead of what's happening, you can really build that familiarity and the comfort and take down that stress level.
Exactly. And build a little bit of joy back into eating. So last week we talked about parenting joyfully, and sometimes building back that trust involves really just stripping away the relationship the child has with food and starting over with joy, right? And use those parenting principles and be proactive, but also try to strip away the anxiety and start to have fun with food and make friends with food again. Okay, so let's talk about this.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Of course, Dr. Fernando talks about this with her patients. When they come in, she talks to the families about that we have growing times and we have eating times, and those are two separate times. And I feel the same way as a teacher. And knowing now that more and more families are at home doing school from home or homeschooling or doing some combination of in school and at home, that this schedule needs to happen or things sort of devolve in the kitchen.
Yes.
And I've heard from many families who are schooling at home right now. And I actually, this was a mom of some older kids, some older boys. They're out working and they had to set up a camera in the kitchen because the boys were in the fridge and the pantry all day long while they were supposed to be on school.
Yes.
So really by setting up a schedule with your family from the littlest all the way to your teenagers to even yourself is going to help everyone stay on track. So that's really one important thing about being proactive when it comes to food and your family is to have a plan. So this is a nice idea of how you could break up your morning time when you're eating, that you will need a snack at a point, and then you'll need lunchtime and a snack and then dinner. But really, other than that, the between times are what we call learning times or growing times versus eating times.
That's right. So we need to give our bodies, our mouths, a break from eating. And next week, we're going to talk about oral hygiene and how important it is to give our mouths a break from eating and the acid that develops in your mouth that can erode your enamel when you eat all the time. So for a number of reasons, it's important to take a break from eating. And I know in the US, especially with younger children, the culture around toddlers is to kind of let them eat whenever they want. And for some kids that might work, but for a lot of kids, it really is important to kind of take a break from eating.
I mean, don't you see the kids that have the little snack cup of something
all the time.
In the car, at the doctor's office,
crackers, a lot of crackers.
Wherever,
There's a popular snack here that is a little cracker that's shaped like a fish. And I always say that that's the toddler's like fifth food group.
Is fishy crackers.
Fish crackers. And so parents, the interesting thing about young children, particularly in this age group from about 1.5 to about 4, the growth in those children is really, really slow. And so that age group, they don't really need a lot of food like they do in the first year. All of you who are parents, you may remember seeing this incredible growth in the first year. And so babies eat a lot.
And they're excited about the new foods you're introducing. They're grabbing them, they're smushing them on their face and seeing how they feel and taste and touch.
And they're not doing anything else, really. They're just kind of eating.
That's kind of the fun in their life is they get to try new foods. But then all of a sudden you can walk. And food isn't as interesting.
And you can say no.
Right.
So toddlers learn that they have a whole new toolbox of developmental skills. They can say no, and their body doesn't actually need that many calories, right? And so this is a really important thing, I think, for parents to know proactively before they enter this toddler phase where they stop eating a lot. Because what happens is you're used to your child eating a lot, and then they don't, and then we start pulling out the crackers, the sweet
and
foods.
Because sometimes they start to refuse foods that they had previously enjoyed.
Correct.
So maybe if your baby loved berries, and was always eating cut strawberries and blueberries and blackberries, and then all of a sudden they're 2 or 2.5, and they are like, no berries.
Yeah.
And so then you're worried because they're not eating their berries, so you give them some crackers that you know they'll eat.
Maybe they're throwing all of their berries on the floor. This is another interesting thing. You know, they learn that they don't have to eat food and they can do other things with food. Sometimes that gives a reaction too. Parents get upset, and that's fun for them. So they keep doing it, right? So a lot of food doesn't end up in their tummy. But it's important to know that that's okay, because at that age, they don't need to eat a lot. So what happens is, without knowing that, parents start to give a second choice and a third choice. And
fillers.
And a lot of filler foods. Very palatable, delicious, not very nutritious food, like our fish-shaped crackers.
Or, you know, the drinkable yogurts, which are, you know, I see my kids at preschool, some of my more selective kids, that's one thing that they'll always take is a drinkable yogurt, but it's very, very full of sugar.
Sugar, right. It's filling and it's full of sugar, and not maybe as nutritious as if they ate
some
food,
yogurt or some fruit.
Foods. So this is where the feeding schedule can be really important for this toddler age group, because these kids, if we keep giving them those highly palatable foods all day long, they never develop hunger.
Right, and they don't know what that feels like.
So it's very difficult for a child to feel hungry for a nutritious meal if they are eating those highly palatable snack foods all the time and their belly is never hungry. And so this is an important thing, I think, for parents to understand. We have a saying around here that hunger is the best sauce, which means that a food will be more enticing when you are a little bit hungry. And so when a toddler or a child is offered a food, when they have a little bit of hunger, they have more drive to try that food. Right? They may be more apt to try a food that is not their preferred food. Maybe it's a food they're practicing. Maybe it's a nutritious food that's a new item at home. They're more likely to try it if they're a little bit hungry. And I know that can feel uncomfortable as parents. We don't want our children to be hungry, but hunger is a normal human sensation. We're not talking about letting your child be hungry all day long or for days on end, but to have a schedule where you're eating and then you're developing hunger will make the mealtime or snack time a little bit easier, I think.
It also helps for children to learn those hunger cues, because you know, this is a ripple effect that will last a lifetime for those children who don't develop hunger and satiation cues. They either don't know what it feels like to be hungry and are not choosing those healthy foods, or they don't know when to stop eating because their hunger is satisfied. And so that's what I worry about too with some of my other kids. In school, often will have snack time, and they will eat the snack that's provided, that is a well-rounded snack, but want more.
Right.
And they will fill up. They will keep having seconds and thirds and fourths. And it may be berries and carrot sticks and hummus that is really good stuff. But also what they're doing is filling. And so I say to them, this is what I always say, this is just a snack. You're going to have lunch in a little while.
Right.
So just to help them understand that there's, you know, that portions and satiating that hunger is okay to get you to the next eating time.
Right. And then we're going to have a break from eating, and we're going to
do other things.
Yeah. Right.
Yep. We're going to go outside, or we're going to do some schoolwork, or we're going to play.
Exactly. So that's, I think, a really important thing in terms of parenting proactively, is having that schedule. I love these little kids.
I do. These are our mindful kids, and we've talked about with previous sessions, building a mindful appreciation of food, where it grows, where it comes from, what it does for your bodies, how it feels, how it looks, how it smells. And so we use these children to help us remember about teaching a mindful appreciation of food. And this really is something that you will do in those learning times or growing times. that's when you'll learn about food. That's when you'll get proactive and prepare the foods that you're going to have later for meals and snacks, and involve the children in helping you to prepare the foods. So our kids show us. And another thing to talk about during those, here's some of our kids, and you know, you can see how much they enjoy exploring, building a snack together. You can see that's a home, one of our home schools that uses the curriculum, and then the kids enjoying later the snack that they made, which are some frozen fruit pops. So another thing that we like to do during a learning time is we talk about the superpowers of fruits and vegetables, and we teach children what the vitamins and minerals are in different foods and what it does to help your bodies. And it's really important that kids learn how good healthy foods are for their bodies.
Right.
It really impacts their excitement for trying things. I know my kids, when we talk about, you know, that kiwis have a lot of vitamin K that heals their cuts and scrapes, they want to, you know, eat some kiwis because they know they have cuts and scrapes from falling off their bike. And so I find that kids get energized when they learn about the superpowers of foods. And this is not something that we talk about when we're eating the food.
Right.
We don't say, eat this because this spinach has got some iron in it. It's going to give you good muscles. Right. We're going to learn that in a learning time. And then when we're enjoying our meal.
Right. The kids may think about that.
Yeah.
And it may entice and empower them to try the food, but it's not something we need to discuss while we're eating.
Yeah, to say, eat that because.
Right. We really want to enjoy the experience of eating while we're eating. But, you know, the research does show that even for young children, learning how a food affects their body in specific ways can make it easier for them to try. They're more apt to want to try those foods. And we see this every day in using our curriculum and teaching kids here in our teaching kitchen. They love to know that vitamin C will help them fight germs and that folate will help them grow. And they're excited to eat those foods so they can see how those foods will affect their bodies.
And even some of the names of the foods that we have a bunch of different recipes for energy bites. We have pumpkin energy bites and carrot energy bites and cookie bites. And they just saying the word energy, they're like, I've got to have my energy bite so I can run around in the playground. They really feel, they understand the power of food to help their bodies.
It's all about branding.
It is, yeah. And it's about having fun. Enjoy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I think another important thing to mention is that, you know, children really look up to the grown-ups in their lives and how they're forming relationships with food. They're really watching our every move. And I think it's a great opportunity to model healthy eating, you know, and that's another way that you can be proactive, is to show kids that you recognize how certain foods affect your body. When you eat maybe some of the foods that might be more sweets or dessert foods or snack foods, you know, you can talk about, I love to eat these foods, but when I eat too many of them, it might make me feel less energetic. But when I eat these foods very regularly, I feel really good. And I think it's important to have those conversations.
And one way that we talk about those foods at school is perhaps, you know, it's a child's birthday and their family has brought in some small treats for that occasion. We talk about that, you know, they're sometimes foods and then they're everyday foods.
Right.
And so you might not have a sugary snack every day, but everyday foods are fruits and vegetables.
Right, exactly. And I think another point about modeling healthy eating is that as our child's grown-ups, we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be great eaters. We may have foods that we don't like, that we wish we liked, that we need to practice. And it's okay to talk about that with kids as well. You know, I never really liked peppers. I'm still practicing them. And you can show kids that you can be brave and learn to eat foods that maybe you didn't like as a child too. And you can have that journey with your child. And I think that's really important too. Yeah. They're really watching you for those cues as to what your relationship is. So put your best foot forward and have conversations as much as you can.
And taking that time to do both of these things that you see in this graphic, that they're preparing the food together, but then have a time when they're eating together. A lot of times parents get busy and you're going to put the food to the kids and you're going to do the dishes and do some other things that you need to get done. And really taking that time and making a conscious decision that we're going to have these eating times together.
Right.
And sit down and have a snack. You know, at school, we sit down, the teachers, we have our snack with the children at their small tables. Yes. And we model table talk and manners and practicing food and all of those wonderful things that you can learn when you're eating together, and good conversation.
Absolutely too. And what I love about this photo is that they're really enjoying the process of putting the meal together too. And I think so many times we feel like we have to go to the kitchen and slave over a hot stove and
then call people, come and eat, and then they come and eating is over in 5 minutes, and then there are the dishes, and it's like, wow.
Right.
What just happened here?
I used to be like that, and then I learned early that really the mealtime connection can start as you're cooking. And so when you involve your child in cooking, first of all, they're spending time with you. It's a time for connection. They're learning an important foundational skill of cooking, which they'll have to do someday for themselves. And they're also developing a friendship with food as they touch it and smell it and chop it and cut it and stir it.
And learn how things go together and develop their own likes and dislikes and flavor palettes.
Correct. They'll find their own preferences. So I think it's important to really involve children in cooking. Sometimes it's a little uncomfortable. I had a conversation with a mom yesterday, and she said, well, I like my kitchen to be clean, and so it's hard for me to get my children involved. And I said, you know, I respect that. It's hard for a lot of us to get rid of that desire to keep everything neat. But you can always clean up later. Yeah. And you should really try to embrace those moments where you can cook together, even if it's not perfectly clean.
And get the kids cleaning up. I mean, we get little sweepers and dustpans, and the kids learn all of the different cleaning jobs in the kitchen. They learn to rinse dishes, wash vegetables, sweep the floor, sponge the tables. They can learn these things, and they should learn these things.
And it gives them a sense of self-esteem and self-worth when they can be helpful. Yeah, especially young kids, they love to be helpful. Sometimes a little too helpful. Yeah,
you can make a little job chart. You can do lots of great things.
Yep.
All right, you're going to talk about these cuties, and I'm going to build something right here.
Okay, so this is something else in terms of being proactive. You know, a lot of kids, they do fill up on beverages that don't necessarily give them a lot of nutrition, but may stifle their hunger. So we always talk about really just keeping beverages very simple. Water and milk are really the only options that children should have. We talked last week about juices. A lot of families had questions about juices. Juice is a processed food. It doesn't have a lot of fiber, and it does contain a lot of sugar. And those sugars are rapidly absorbed in the body and aren't necessarily good for our physiology to have that much sugar in such a short amount of time. So we really recommend water and milk only. That doesn't mean your child can't enjoy a juice beverage outside of the home if you're going out for a special occasion or to a restaurant. But in the home, we really don't recommend having juice. Not to mention that it is high in acid, which we mentioned before, which can be hard on the teeth when kids are ingesting juice regularly. So as kind of an alternative to just milk and water, what we sometimes do is we make our water a little bit fancy. So do you want to show them what you put in there?
So I'm going to be using these beautiful blood oranges for our snack plate later, but I used the ends and just dropped them in a pitcher of water with some ends of lemon and lime and some mint fresh from the garden. And then you can just pop this in the fridge, and then you have fruit water ready to go all day long. You can refill the water as it goes down and keep that infusion of flavor. And so you know, plain water is our beverage of choice for grown-ups and for adults, for grown-ups and for kids. But sometimes you want a little special something. So that's why we like to make a fruit water. And we'll do this in the teaching kitchen with whatever fruits or even vegetables. You can throw cucumbers in water,
Right.
which is a nice, refreshing taste. So there, you can do berries, strawberries and kiwi.
There's so
anything.
many combinations.
Yeah.
And the children sometimes like to kind of come up with their own combinations too of different fruit waters. So it's a way to make your water a little bit more special, a little bit flavored. It still protects the teeth. It doesn't have the added sugar. And you're training kids to like prefer an unsweetened beverage as their beverage of choice.
Yes.
Which is really, I think, one of the best habits that you can teach your children is really to make water their primary beverage. So let's talk about building a satisfying meal or snack. So, you know, in our culture, we see a lot of snacks, a lot of snacking. There's a big snack food culture industry. And a lot of snack foods, traditional snack foods that you find in the grocery store are very unbalanced and unsatisfying, maybe by design, because when you're eating an unsatisfying snack, you just keep eating it. For example, a salty pretzel.
Or I open a bag of chips and that's all I'm going to have for my snack. And somehow I just keep eating chips because it's not really hitting that hunger.
It's not satisfying, right?
Yeah.
So our dietitian, Sarah Moran, who's been with us for some of our other sessions, the way that she describes building a satisfying snack is to really have these 4 components. And when you have 4 components of your snack, you're building a more satisfying snack, so it's easier to eat a sensible portion.
And I really think it's important to point out that this says building a satisfying meal or snack. And so what we tell our families that come to the kitchen, or I talk to my families at school, is that if it says snack on the package, it's probably more like a treat. And so those things should be treated more like a special treat. You're going to have chips or whatever. But a snack should just be a mini meal. The same thing you would make for the meal, you could break it down into smaller portions and have it as a snack.
Right. And then if your child, for some reason, isn't hungry at mealtime, if they've had a balanced snack, then you're at least getting them that nutrition that they need, that they would normally have gotten from a meal. So the 4 components are carbohydrate. So that's a starchy component. That's what's going to give you your energy. Then the protein component is important. Protein is important for a number of reasons, but it also makes us satiated when we eat protein. A fiber component, which also makes us
feel
satiated,
full,
right? Because it takes up space. And so fiber is going to come from a lot of the things that we know are good for us: fruits, vegetables, whole grains. And then there's the fat component. And it's important to have a little bit of fat too. I mean, our brain needs fat, especially a developing brain.
Children's brains.
Right. In the first 2 years, they're growing their brain. Most of their brain volume happens in that first 2 years. And so babies and toddlers, they need fats to grow that brain. And so that also kind of creates a hormonal cascade that tells us that we're finished, we're full. So fat is super, super important. And that can come from some of the meats that we eat. It can come from oils. It can come from nut butters.
It can come from cheese.
That's right. And so it's important to just point out that some of these foods may fall into one or more categories.
Which is great.
So
because then if you have yogurt, you're hitting a little bit of the fat and also the protein if you're having a nice Greek yogurt.
And there's some sugars in there.
And so you're getting a little
carbohydrate. And so if you put, the thing that it might be missing is fiber, right? So if you're adding
we could add some berries
to it,
or maybe some seeds or nuts.
Fruit, you can stir in a little bit of seeds and nuts and chia seeds on top. Then you kind of,
elevated this.
That's right. And so it doesn't have to feel like a big meal, but having those components helps us know when to stop. And so we don't risk overeating our snacks.
So I'm going to jump over to how to be proactive while you're mostly at home during the pandemic.
Right.
So as I said earlier, many families are finding themselves at home and everybody is in the kitchen eating all the time, grazing all the time. And also you're having to prepare more meals and snacks at home than you would in normal times.
Right.
And the way you keep organized during normal times is you plan your snacks and lunches and you get them packed up and ready to go so that when you go to work or you go to school, you grab that lunch pack and you're good to go. So we are going to encourage all of you to do the same thing at home, that you want to have all of your foods prepared. You want to, everybody choose what they're doing for their lunch and their snack, pack it up, have it ready in the fridge, because if your children have, you know, a 50-minute break between 2 virtual classes, they need to be able to go to the fridge, get the lunch, open it up, sit down, and be ready to go. So we're going to kind of show you some ideas of how you can do that. I'm going to show you, this is going to be, basically, I'm going to show you what's in my fridge. Okay, so this is kind of how my fridge looks to start the week. So I have fruits and veggies in these containers. I have some cookie bites, which are a healthy energy bite snack. I have some meatballs and I have cheese already cubed and ready to go. So this is how we would just like open this up and everybody get their lunch box, and the night before you can build your lunch or your snack. So do you want to build? I'm going to build a preschool size.
Okay.
And if you want to build a grown-up size, we can get going.
And this just is so, I have to say, very proactive, right?
This is
so you're probably
ultimate proactive.
This,
And I did not, I have helpers, so the kids cut this stuff. So you want to get everybody involved in the preparing part.
Right.
So we'll get these open, and if you want to hand me the preschool lunch box, I'll show everybody what that looks like a little bit.
Let me just show the lunch packing map as well.
Oh yeah, do that. That'd be great.
So if you go to the Dr. Yum website, dryum.org, one of our most popular articles is called Pediatrician's 10 Tips for Packing a Nutritious Lunch. And there are a variety of different tips on how to get your kids involved, to pack a waste-free lunch that isn't using a lot of disposable items, you know, and how to do things ahead of time and be really proactive. So I really feel like lunch packing is one of those things that parents struggle with. They may be doing it in the morning. They want to,
and they're also using like 5 different Ziploc bags,
different boxes and bags. So we really try to simplify lunch by being proactive, and also recognizing too, especially when kids are in school, that they don't really care about eating lunch when they're at school. Their primary objective when they're in school lunch is to really form social connections. They want to talk with their friends. They want to gossip and you know, find out what's going on.
And it's a short time.
It's a very short time.
Between classes, they have to get in and get going.
In the US, the kids may have 15, 25 minutes to eat, which is not a lot of time. And so
to fumble around with.
For them to open one box and have everything there, and have everything in small, easy to manage bites. And my friend Coach Mel, the speech language pathologist who I mentioned before, who's my co-author, she called it grab and gab. So kids can be grabbing food and gabbing or talking with their friends very easily and finish their meal while they're able to socialize and not have to worry about opening so many things and, you know, putting together foods in ways. You want to make it easy.
And I think it's also important to realize that a lot of times we are expecting children to eat more at lunch than they really need to eat.
Right.
So they really just need a little bit of this and a little bit of that,
right,
for it to be very satisfying.
So we set this up as a guide for families and children, similar to our snack guide, but in a way that is very consistent with the USDA, or U.S. Department of Agriculture, nutrition guidelines that children learn about in school. So our children in school learn about these food groups. And
they learn about it with a choose my plate, which basically is a sectioned plate.
Right. And they learn about these proportions that roughly 1/4 of their portion, their overall portion size, should be occupied by a fruit, a vegetable, a grain, and a protein. So we set up this lunch packing map so that families can print this out and they can see what examples are of different fruits, grains, vegetables, and proteins. And then on the right, you'll see a printout that you can make where you actually create that map for you and your child to be able to follow during the week.
And so they can fill in, what fruits do we have in the fridge, what grains do we have in the pantry and fridge, what veggies and what proteins. Right. And then each day they can make sure they get something from each category.
They can choose one from each category.
Yeah.
It's so simple that way. And so kids can say, okay, I'm going to pick raisins, I'm going to pick this cracker or bread, I'm going to pick this vegetable and this protein. Many children in America, I observe, do not get the fruit and vegetable. And so we recommend 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, which most children don't get because they're not thinking about fruits and vegetables. Or 2 servings of vegetables, that's okay too. But it's hard to make that commitment to 5 servings if you're not doubling up at lunch and at dinner. So we have a few different.
So I'm going to build this one, and you can see there's little sections in each, and they're even labeled that what each section is. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do cheese for my dairy. I'm going to do 3 cubes of cheese. I'm going to, for my fruit, I'm going to have one of these blood orange slices and a few blueberries. I have a lot of choices of veggies here, so I'm going to just pick a few. I have, if you want to build yours at the same time too.
So I have a lunchbox.
I'm going to do some cauliflower. I'm going to do kind of one of everything in here.
This is a lunchbox that's very inexpensive, and it has 1 lid. So we talked about how 1 lid is nice, and then you've got everything together, so kids don't have to fumble.
I'm going to grab these crackers. These are a whole grain cracker that will go great with the cheese.
Okay. So I'm going to put a couple of meatballs. In my main container, I'm going to put my grain and my protein. The typical thing that American children eat is a sandwich, maybe with a little bit of meat.
I'm going to have a few chicken veggie meatballs in my protein area.
I'm going to do a little bit of each too.
And I'm going to get one of these cookie bites to go in my little treat area. So this is it. This is a more than complete lunch for a young child.
Sometimes, you know, children like to dip also. So sometimes you can
we do have hummus, and we've got yogurt here.
You can put a little dip. Sometimes you can even find a little small cupcake container.
Yeah, the little silicone ones that'll slip right in there to make those bentos.
And I think it's important to point out that, you know, Wendy's box for the small child really has a very manageable amount of food. It's not overwhelming. That child may not even finish all of that, and that's okay. We kept things small. Sometimes when children see too much food, they become overwhelmed.
See, this can just go right in the fridge. So even if you're schooling at home, have all those things set up and in your fridge and ready to go, so you're all set.
What I'm doing here is instead of putting all of one vegetable in here, I put a couple of carrot sticks, 1 cucumber, a little bit of sugar snap peas. It's almost like a little sampling. It makes more variety, and sometimes kids will respond to that well. So I'll put a few crackers in mine. And so this food is
we also need to, we're going to be wrapping up a little bit early today for another session. So if you do have questions that you're thinking of right now, please go ahead and add them to the chat. The other thing is, if you don't have fresh fruit, we've got lots of dried fruit choices over there. Perhaps you just have some mango. This is, you know, just dried mango, no sugar added. You might have some nuts that you want to add, or seeds. Anything that you have can fill in.
And frozen things are nice to have too. So sometimes by the end of the week, we run out of our fresh foods, or maybe some of them are spoiled. So it's nice to have a few less perishable items available, and you put that on your map too, so kids know that they can get a few frozen things or dried things.
And this large mixed vegetable container that I have here, what's great about this is you can refill it throughout the week as you need to for building lunches and snacks. But then at the end of the week, whatever you have left, go ahead and make a soup, a stir fry, use our Meal-O-Matic, and figure out what you can do with whatever you have left that's already chopped and good to go.
So let me just make sure we don't have anything else here.
I think we got to the end of our slides. So now we're up to, if there are any questions, we would definitely welcome them.
And if you want to follow us, I'm going to put up our website where you can find the lunch packing map. And you can find a lot of these recipes. This chicken vegetable meatball recipe is one of our favorites. It has a lot of vegetables. It's very savory.
It's great for a grab and go. And the nice thing about the recipe is it's great as a cold grab and go. You can eat them cold, but you could also turn them into your dinner by adding some pasta and sauce, or tossing them in a stir fry.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if there are any questions, let's see if we have any in the chat. Not so many questions.
Okay. Well, this food is making me hungry, Dr. Young.
I know. Well, I hope that everybody has learned a couple of strategies about parenting proactively, and that you'll remember to parent joyfully along the way and have fun and really get your kids involved, especially during this pandemic. Life is a little bit more stressful, and we can all find some time for connection around food.
Yeah, I think a silver lining for this time is that families have spent a lot of time together in a more relaxed, and you don't have a lot of places you can go or things you can do. So you're together, and you might as well really enjoy that time. Your kids are only small for so long, and then they're off on their own, right?
I know, that's right.
The young boys in the fruit water picture are Dr. Young's boys, and they're big boys now.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've really enjoyed while we're all home together is we cook a lot at my house, but we're cooking more than ever, and my kids have a little bit more time to participate more than they used to. When they were really little, they were always at my side helping me cook, and then as they got bigger and into their activities, I found myself cooking more on my own. But once again, we're all cooking together, so that's been really fun for me.
Yeah, it's important, for everyone's emotional well-being during this time to check in with each other and make sure you're doing okay. And that's a great way to do it, is conversation seems to naturally flow when you're preparing food together, when you're chopping, and you're not really like having a conversation eye to eye, but you're able to just talk and chop, and that relaxed way of connecting really allows for some of those, things you need to talk about, how people are really feeling during this time. And families are finding that important.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a wonderful session. We hope you'll tune in next time. Next week, we'll be talking about parenting bravely. Mm-hmm. And we'll also be talking about some oral hygiene tips.
Oral health.
Oral health is so important. If you want to have a great eater, that great little eater has to have a healthy, happy mouth.
And really, your oral health, doesn't it affect every system in your body?
Yes. If you have a healthy mouth, you're more likely to have a healthy body. So I think that is going to be a fun session to share with you. I have a practice full of healthy, happy eaters with very healthy mouths. We take a lot of time to educate families about taking care of their developing teeth and mouth. And so I'm really excited to share that with you next week. So please tune in next week. And we hope you find the handouts helpful too. these slides that we shared with you should be part of the handout that you can download so you can see how to build that satisfying meal and snack.
And make sure you visit our website, because there's so many really wonderful resources there available for anybody, anywhere.
Well, thanks so much also to the Abu Dhabi Childhood Authority for making this webinar series a reality. We've enjoyed this series so much. I can't believe next week is our last. Well,
no, we have 2 more.
2 more. Okay,
Yeah.
so next week
But
is session 5.
It's pretty amazing to know that we're connecting with people across the world, and we really appreciate the opportunity to.
Oh, we have one question before we leave.
Well, let's see.
So I have a question about my child. She's 2 years, 10 months. Since she's a baby, she's used to mashed fruits and mashed vegetables, but I want her to eat solid fruits and vegetables now. How many times I've tried, but she's still refusing to eat solid. So, you know, it may be that you have to go slowly.
Kind of in a stage, you know, so perhaps you just steam a little bit less each time to, you know, but for the beginning, steam it well, but don't mash it all the way, so it has a little more texture in it.
Yeah.
And then sort of keep adding that texture until you're able to get a little bit more of the solid.
So steamed, I think, is a great preparation. 2 other things come to mind. One is roasting. So roasted foods are really great for toddlers because it gives them a chance to see a whole fruit and vegetable in its natural form, but it also softens and sweetens a lot of
it develops that flavor, and it
Yeah.
really makes it have a really nice flavor. We find that in the teaching kitchen a lot, that some children who may not prefer a vegetable in a raw preparation or another way, that all of a sudden when we roast it, they're like, ooh, this is tasty.
Yeah. So I would try that preparation. And the other one that's really good for toddlers is blanching. So sometimes foods can be a little too crunchy, and when they eat them, they get little pieces and shards that aren't comfortable in their mouth. So carrots are really good for blanching. If you take a carrot and you boil it for a minute or 2 and then put it in an ice cold water bath, what happens is it will stop the cooking process so it doesn't get too soft. It still has a little bit of bite, but it's got more moisture in it. Right. And so that makes it a little bit easier for the teeth to get through. You get less of these pieces. So I would try that also. And then I guess the last thing I would say is if you're having trouble getting your 2-year-old onto solid foods and you try all these things, I would check in with your pediatrician to see if there could be a feeding issue that a specialist may be able to help.
Yeah, if there's something going on with the oral development that is not allowing the chew to be comfortable.
Exactly. Well, thank you for that question. And I think we're about out of time. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.